Okay, we know it's getting warmer outside and you're probably getting the bug for camping. And so today we are going to chat about how we have camped with all of our babies and toddlers over the years, kind of our tips and tricks, things we avoid. We're going to get into it. Let's get started.
This is the Balanced Family Podcast with Ben
and Jessica. There's a lot to balance when you have a family: marriage, kids, health, career, while you're trying to balance all the opinions out there on how to do things right.
Today, we'll cut through the noise, tackle hard questions, and share stories as we try to get to the heart of the things that really matter. Man, we could not have picked a better day to record an episode about camping.
It's true.
Right now, it is like the quintessential Ozark spring day, which in the Ozarks here in Arkansas, it could be freezing in the spring. It could be super hot and humid and rainy. But right now it is like perfect. Crisp.
We definitely have the itch to go camping right now.
Crisp morning, already starting to warm up. What's the high today?
It's like 70.
So, I mean,
oh my gosh. The high is 78 today.
Oh, wow.
That's actually almost getting hot. But anyway.
Yeah. Man, it is a beautiful day. So now, if you're thinking about moving here, please don't, because
we already have enough people moving here.
Yes, everyone. It feels like everybody in the world is moving up here, and it's
we're like one of the fastest growing metros, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
top 10 or something like that. But people need to stop it.
Yeah, stop driving up our house prices, please.
Yes.
Can I just point out that I have paper today? I'm trying to be more like you, Ben. I usually have my phone to look at our notes, but.
Paper.
I'm vibing with this. This is
hey,
nice.
Years ago, people were like, paper is done, you know, like paper's still around. And even like print magazines, like you go to Barnes and Noble or whatever, like there's a lot of magazines.
There's a resurgence, I feel like, of nostalgia and like wanting to keep there is nothing else like picking up a crisp book or a magazine and reading on actual paper.
Yeah.
So, and yes, paper is still around. That was funny to me. Of course it is.
Well, I mean, just like
going to disappear.
I mean, I'm like paperless in like almost everything I do. And I'm just so much more organized. I would never be as organized if I had paper, but like, I love a print book. I love a print magazine because it gets me off of screens, take a break with my eyes. Speaking of which, we read a lot when we camp.
We do. That's true. Yeah, I always bring a book for sure, or a few books if we're going to be gone long. But okay, so we wrote down this first question. When did you first go camping as a kid, and why did you love it? Did you do a lot of camping when you were a kid?
We did some.
Okay.
So we had a camper because we deer hunted, and we had a camper for deer hunting. And then we had a period of time that we were like road tripping as a family in that camper. And it was just awesome. And I know because we've already discussed this, you think you're so much more hardcore than me because you guys tent camped all grown up. But no, we tent camped, I think, early on. I do have some early memories of it. And I remember doing like stuff with like a church groups and whatever when I was a kid. But as a family, we had a camper, and man, we took that thing all over the place. I remember going out west, big road trips. I remember we went on a road trip. We were going to go all the way up to Boston, and we're in the central part of the United States, so like either coast is pretty far for us. Mm-hmm. But we were all the way up into like DC, and then one of my grandfathers passed away, and we had to turn around and go back. Did a really quick trip to like Gettysburg, and then we went down and it kind of shortened our trip. But we did a lot of camping in that camper. How about you?
We camped a lot. We were lake people. So, I mean, that was the first thing I remember. And my parents tell me I don't remember this part, but I was out on a boat at 6 months old, and we did a lot of tent camping, even when I was small. My first actual like memory of tent camping, where were we living? We were probably living in Missouri, maybe. I would have been like 5. And I just remember there was a storm. That's all I remember. And they had like this giant foam mattress that they would roll up and put in the back of what are those big minivans that are like very square?
Aerostar.
Aerostar.
Yeah, we had an Aerostar,
yeah, we
dude.
put it in the Aerostar. And we would go tent camping and they would unroll that massive, I mean, it took up almost the entire tent. And then Justin and I, my brother and I, would sleep on like the side wings. Like we had like a tiny little spot that we would have our sleeping bags, and my parents would sleep on the foam mattress. And I remember one particular camping trip, all I remember is that it was raining and we were playing games in the tent. And that was just kind of unique. And it was like a little scary because it was kind of windy. But I mean, I was pretty young. So my brother would have been like a toddler. Yeah. So mad respect for my parents doing that, because tents were not as nice back then, you know?
No, they weren't. They took way longer
like
to set
so
up.
long. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, if y'all hear any squeaking, that's our dog.
Yeah.
She's pretty fired up this morning. Man, you talking about the Aerostar, dude? That just took me back to the 90s, man.
The fabric curtains.
Yeah.
Like who thought like, man, we should really like put fabric curtains in a car?
I don't think we did. I don't think we had fabric
We had like
curtains.
the weird like velvety material that like you would cinch them up and like put like a little Velcro strap, and then you could like, I guess, undo them. I don't know if we ever did. And it would make the van like pitch black. I mean, it was kind of wild because it was very thick fabric.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, that would get so gross.
Yeah.
Thinking about us having that in our car right now, like, ugh.
Yeah. Man, and I remember back then minivans only had one sliding door. I remember when they came out with sliding doors on the other side, that like blew people's mind. And that was before they were even power doors. Now they're all power doors. Like these kids these days, they don't know what it's like to have to close the door. But I still like get anxiety thinking about a time that I accidentally got my fingers slammed in that door. Like
me too.
I mean that
my finger is still this finger. My finger is still slightly curved.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justin. He slammed my finger in the door.
Yeah. I probably slam my siblings' fingers all the time too. I mean, it just happened.
Anyway, we digress. I camped a lot growing up, a whole lot. And so and I am a little bit of a purist.
Yeah.
In that I like tent camping.
Yeah.
I like, if I'm going to go camping, I don't want to be in air conditioning. Like the whole point is to be out in nature. And so why I love it is that it, like to me, when we went camping, it meant like fun outdoors activities. Like we're going to have fun on the boat. Because back then we didn't have like a permanent residence near the lake or anything. My parents now live right next to the lake, like literally on the lake. But back then, you know, if we were to go and spend a weekend at the lake with our boat, because we had a boat all growing up, we would have to go camp or rent a place. And obviously camping is a lot cheaper. So we would camp, I mean, a lot to be able to go out on the boat and spend all day. And I mean, man, just the feeling that you would get after a day out on the boat and you come back to your camp spot and you're like kind of sunburned and you're so tired. And I remember my parents would always have grape soda and Velveeta macaroni and cheese that we would make on our little Coleman stove. And like, man, that just hit perfect every time.
Well, you know, I think I like this nostalgia because it just shows as a kid, like you have no clue how much work it is.
So hard.
For parents to take you camping. And you just remember the good times. You just remember being connected with nature and just being outside. And there's just something that just switches on in a kid when they go camping. It's undescribable. I don't know what it is. It's just so fun. And I remember as a little kid, one time a trip with friends, and we tent camped by the lake. And I just remember I was just so excited. I could never sleep. You know, that's how it is when you're a kid. You just want to stay up. You just never want the fun to end. But in the background are parents that are working their butts off and are so exhausted and so tired, but it's always worth it. Well, usually, as we'll probably tell with a few stories today. Yeah, we have a few
stories where it was not worth it.
Yeah.
What were we thinking?
But it is good that we're bringing up this whole thing about tents versus campers, because I think a lot of the people listening that have campers are like, yeah, it's just life's a little easier with that, especially with little kids and having climate controlled environment. Totally different ball game, but it's still work taking little kids, and it's a sacrifice. So we're going to talk through some more stories and just kind of tips and tricks we learned when we camped with littles, because we camped as a couple before we even had kids.
I was just thinking I was pregnant, actually. I remember I was pregnant with our first and we went camping. And the reason why I remember this is the campground that we were at, oh gosh, it had a bathroom that was, like a hole in the ground. Yeah. It was not an actual, no flush toilets or anything. And, when you're pregnant, you have to go to the bathroom like all the time. So I remember waking up at 3 a.m. and thinking to myself, oh my God, I have to walk to that scary hole. It's pitch black dark. I'm super pregnant. I wasn't super pregnant. I was probably like late second trimester. Oh my gosh, it was so rough. And so I guess that's technically our baby's first camping trip.
Yeah.
When I was pregnant. But yeah, we camped a lot before babies, a whole lot.
Yeah. And I remember we camped all the way out east. We started to. We did on this big east road trip, but then we got tired of that.
Baby moon, which was not really a baby moon, but it was before we got pregnant.
Yeah. We eventually quit.
Well, there was the cockroach story.
Yeah.
We probably shouldn't even. We have so many camping stories that we should probably focus. Because if not, we'll be here all day talking about all of our crazy camping stories.
I have to admit, I can tell that story real quick since you just brought it up. But yeah, we were road tripping out east, and we were like outside of Baltimore or something, or DC, and like the only campground in DC. Yeah. And we like set up everything, and then we left to go sightsee, and then came back late that night. We were like super tired, and then just started noticing just an obscene amount of cockroaches like all over the campground.
All over the tent too.
Well, we didn't know that. We were just like seeing them out in the bathrooms. We were seeing them like on the ground. And then I remember flashing our flashlights and seeing like one cockroach on the outside of the tent. And you were just like, And I was like, well, the tent's really, nice. It's like, we don't know there's any in there. It was super late. It was like 10. We were tired, and I was like, listen, we'll go into that tent. And if we find a cockroach, we'll pack up and leave. And we went into the tent, started looking around, no cockroaches. This is great. And, scoping out under our bags. It's looking good. And then we pull open the sheets of the bed.
It was so bad, y'all.
There is one sole cockroach. It is giant too. Just sitting on the bed. It's like laughing at us.
Immediately, it was like, whip out our phones, try to find a hotel nearby.
Yeah. So then we
were not in a great part of town.
Yeah. So we laid at night. We found a hotel room, went to the hotel room. We left all our camping stuff. We were so tired, and we went to the hotel room, and then, went to bed, woke up the next day, and literally the car next to us got carjacked.
Yeah. All the windows were busted out.
And we had a lot of our stuff in there from the trip. It's like, I'm so glad that we didn't, we didn't get robbed that night. And so anyway, we went back and packed up all our camping stuff, and we were done for the rest of the trip. We're like, no more camping. We were just so tired.
It's true.
But anyway, so we've had a lot of adventures before we had kids. And when we had kids, it was like we didn't want it to stop. And so how old was our first when we went?
I looked at pictures. She was really little, probably 3 months old.
3 months old. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you would agree with me.
Because it was early summer.
That actually camping with a newborn or like a young baby was actually the easiest phase. It was.
However,
camping.
I remember that particular campsite. This is, again, little pro tip. Look at where the street lamps are when you're picking out a camping spot, because we were right by insanely. I've never experienced a street lamp that bright before.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just really bright because we were literally right next to it. And we didn't have a blackout tent, which we'll get to in a minute at that point. And so there was just light streaming into our tent all night long. And so I think she actually slept decently for a 3-month-old. I don't think we slept very well because it was like actually so genuinely bright inside of our tent.
Well, I mean, we can go ahead and give that tip because we'll probably just scatter out some tips, but blackout tents. That is a must.
Make the investment.
That is the must. We have a blackout tent. We have an instant tent, so there's no setup really involved. They're telescopical legs. It's boom boom. We can set up our tent in like 30 seconds, but it has blackout lights, and we can
not blackout lights. Blackout. It's like a film.
Yeah. Blackout.
That would actually be pretty cool.
Yeah, man.
If you're a certain clientele of camper, that might be.
Yeah.
It's a niche. Someone maybe grab it. Someone maybe not the kids. Take hold of the market.
Yeah. Kids won't be on that trip.
No.
But yeah, so our tent, can zip up with blackout, whatever. There's an inside lining, and it literally blocks all the light. And we learned early on that that's important. Because especially in the summer, whenever you're camping, like sun comes up pretty early, and kids will just be wide awake. And that it's not that our kids sleep in, but like that having that darkness does help. It gives us a little bit of buffer and not be woken up.
Well, especially when they're
early.
young and they have an earlier bedtime.
Yeah.
And if you're camping in the summer, and it doesn't get dark until 9 or 8. Having that blackout tent is really nice because it helps them be able to actually go to bed at a decent hour and not have to stay up until like 10 p.m., which
Definitely
just makes things hard. So anyway, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say before we get into some more like practical tips, why don't we just like run down like stage of life?
Yeah.
Like, so it was easy with newborns and babies.
Well, except for that fall with that same first baby with Journey, we went on our church, a huge group in our church went camping. And remember, that's the camping trip of the scream yelling or the whisper yelling between him, Ben and I in the middle of the night. Because it was cold. And we had this, at that point we had gotten a pretty big tent and we had a pack and play set up. So that was another tip is it's helpful to get a bigger tent, like an 8-person tent, so that you can set up a pack and play. So I had Journey in the pack and play, and I was afraid that she was cold.
But she was sound asleep.
She was sound asleep.
Sound asleep.
But it's like you start being like, oh, I feel like she might be cold. And she was 6 months old probably at this point. And so I told Ben, I was like, I want to have her in bed with us. Like I want her to sleep with us tonight because it's so cold. I'm afraid she's going to, be too cold. And Ben was like, no, don't do it, Jessica. It's not going to be worth it. She's fine. And I couldn't let it go. We had learned as new parents, we had learned the cardinal rule that you don't wake a sleeping baby. Like it's just not. But in my mind, I was like, well, I can just nurse her back to sleep. It'll be fine.
Unless like the house is burning down, you never wake up your sleeping baby unless you just absolutely have to. And it was just like, and there's like, so many friends' tents nearby. It's like if this baby wakes up, like it's going to wake up everyone.
So yeah, we were in this really, it was like off-grid camping. It was right by a river, a really popular river in our area, the Buffalo. And we had probably 7 or 8 tents. So, I mean, it was a pretty big group of people. We were all kind of in the same area. And so, oh gosh. So I pick up Journey and I move her over to the bed and immediately she wakes up naturally.
And is angry.
And is very
that you woke
angry.
her up.
And so I'm trying to get her to be quiet. I'm trying to get her to nurse or, put a passy in or whatever I could do to try to get her to get calm. She was PO'd. She was not happy and would not nurse. And so Ben and
well, you were getting really frustrated and you were just like, dude, I'm done. And this particular baby of ours, she really liked an aggressive rock.
Okay,
aggressive rocking. I mean, violent. Like at home, if we would be rocking her as hard as that rocking chair would go, or we would be swinging her, and she liked that. That's what she liked.
Okay, but so Ben, this is so funny. So Ben grabs her. And I need to move the mic really quickly. And if you guys are listening to this, I'm sorry, you have to look at it on YouTube. This is what Ben did.
Well, there's no rocking chair in the tent, right? There's no rocking chair in the tent. So no, you're not even doing it. You're not even doing it fast enough. Like Journey liked it really fast.
Please.
So I'm sitting in this tent.
So I'm like, what are you doing?
And I'm just like,
this is the way
she likes to be rocked. So now we start whisper yelling. And there were probably some choice words said that I was not proud of, but you and I were getting into it because
we were so mad at
I told you not to wake up this baby. Look what
I'm like, stop. You're going to have shaken baby syndrome.
It was like, we were just having a all out fight. And I don't even know how we eventually got her to bed.
Yeah, actually, all that next part is a blur. But we were so then you feel like when you're in the morning, when you come out of the tent, it's like the walk of shame. But thankfully, there was another family that was camping with us who also had a very funny story. Their kids were a little older, but one of their kids woke up and thought he was blind. And
he screamed in the campground.
Like, I'm blind.
And I heard his dad is like, no, you're not. No. I don't even remember what happened. I think like he had something.
Well, it was so dark.
I think he had an eyelash in his eye.
No. It was because we were camping near the river. There's no lights.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
was
he
just
probably
so
had
dark.
never experienced pitch black dark
Maybe
like that.
so. I thought he
Oh
had.
my gosh.
I thought he had like an eyelash in his eye too, or something. And
I don't know.
it hurt a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
But he was screaming. I'm blind.
So
Is that
we all,
woke everybody up?
walk
That was
out
at
of the
like 4 a.m. Our whole thing was probably at like 2 a.m. But I remember when that happened, I remember selfishly feeling like, okay, well, not everybody's going to hate us in the morning. But I do remember going to breakfast that morning and one of our friends, the one that with the tent like closest to us, her name's Genevieve. And I was like, hey, did you hear us fighting last night? She's like, oh yeah.
Thankfully, we have friends who it was
like,
funny.
She's like, yeah, I heard it all. I was like,
okay. So sorry. So sorry. Anyway, so that was a really good story and learned some lessons from that camping trip.
It doesn't matter how cold it is. Don't wake up.
But here's the thing is I feel like you and I, like we never gave up with this dream of camping because we would have debacles like that. We would have bad camping trips where things didn't go great. And I don't know, we have such a passion for the outdoors, and not just we have a passion, but we really, really wanted our kids to love the outdoors as much as we did. Like that was something that we talked about and decided, hey, we're going to really strategically build this inside of our family culture, which means having bad camping trips, and good camping trips, and just kind of persevering through that because it was just worth it to us.
Right. Now, there were a couple instances, at least two, I remember us going home, actually probably more than two, where we at least went home earlier than we had scheduled. And that's because when you have babies, it's actually easier to camp than when you have toddlers, because toddlers just are constant, especially when they're in that early walking stage, like they are walking around nonstop and risking their life every second. And like I just remember that period of time, like we quite literally could not even get things set up because we were constantly redirecting our kids away from jumping off a cliff or, whatever it was. I just remember that also one year we decided to bring like their tricycles. Oh my gosh. And there's like no pavement. I don't know what we were thinking. So they're just like, I want to ride my tricycle. That
was up at like on the top of a mountain too.
And they were like,
it was flat, but.
Well, they did have some pavement, but it was like really rough. And I mean,
and not very far. And it was a really busy campground. So you had cars constantly coming by. Yeah, that was.
And they're like trying to ride through like this rocky gravel. And they're just screaming like, why it won't work. Why can't I ride my tricycle?
Yeah,
and
it was hard.
Like, we're idiots. And I can't remember if we quit early on that one.
I don't think we did, but there was another one where our second was born, but she was young. And we did pack up literally at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And you packed up the campsite and I went to McDonald's with the other two to get some breakfast. And you met us at that McDonald's after you'd packed up the whole thing by yourself.
Yeah.
And I had the two girls who were unhappy. We all were very unhappy. So many. But we've gone on. I mean, how many times do you think we've camped with our kids total?
Countless.
I mean, we at least do at least 2 a year, if not more. Mm-hmm. And so you times that by our oldest is 11.
Yeah.
That's a good amount.
It's a lot of camping trips.
It's a lot of camping trips.
And man, I'll tell you what, like being on social media, that stuff is over glamorized by influencers. Like you see all these influencers with their babies and their toddlers and their carriers, all these adventures. Dude,
they're hiking.
I guarantee you.
You're constantly feeding them snacks. They're whining, or they went up and then they went down. And then they went back up, and then they went back down. And you don't get to enjoy it.
There's an age where like kids don't get it. Like they're too. They need to be comfortable at all times, and they just don't get it.
So why did we keep doing it?
I don't know. I don't know, because we loved it. Yeah. But I remember many conversations where we asked the same question, like, what are we doing to ourselves? And I think that's an important just takeaway for like the adventurous types, because not everybody really likes camping.
You might be like, this episode is not for me.
Yeah. But like for the adventurous types, like we were, I mean, there's a period of time you got to downshift. I mean, that's kind of what we did. We might have kept trying, but like we leveled our expectations.
Well, there was a year and a half after we had our third. I remember we actually did not camp.
The whole year and a half?
Mm-hmm. It was a while. It was
hard to believe.
An unusual amount of time. Maybe it wasn't a year and a half, but it was like we had skipped at least a spring and a fall. Mm-hmm. So I think it was at least a year, which was highly unusual for us. Yeah. But we just knew like Because we at that point had three that were 4 and under. And we were like, heck no.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not when we worth it. We just knew. We had learned our lesson by that point. But it was like we just kept doing it. And I think part of it is that, I don't know, our philosophy is we could have them scream at the house or we could have them scream in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, yeah.
And really, for Ben and I feel like we get cabin fever kind of easily.
Yeah.
And so sometimes for us, it's just worth the work and the effort just to get out of the house and go do something different. And, you know, and it's very much type 2 fun, but we also, we do make memories.
So many sweet memories. I mean, I remember whenever Journey,
so
like
ones.
one of the grandparents got her like a bug catching kit.
Yes, I was just thinking of that.
And so she was so excited to take it camping. How old is she? Like 2 or 3?
Yeah, maybe 3.
3. And she was like, dude, she was so amped up to use that thing when we go camping next. So we went camping and she was in the car ride like, you know, how do you catch bugs? You know, because she wanted to use this thing. And I just off the wall, I was just like, oh, man, it's easy. You just call out to them and they'll come to you. I was on dad joke or whatever. So when we get to the campground and we're setting up, we have a video of it too. She's just like walking around the woods. Bugs! Bugs!
Where are you?
Bugs! 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 She's got her bug catcher. She's holding it over there. But hey, that occupied her while we set up the camp.
It's true.
For sure. She
It's
did that for like an hour.
Yeah.
You know, just fun memories like that. And even the sacrifice and the hard times. I mean, I remember that one abnormally hot June where we camped and it was just like in the 90s and it was unbearably hot. And we just drove around with the air conditioning just to give them
I forgot
a
about
nap.
that one.
Because they couldn't nap. It was so hot.
Yeah, we put them in the car. It was really hot. And yeah, we just napped them in the car. We drove around the campsite in circles for about an hour and a half in silence in the air conditioning.
That was that campground with like the domesticated skunks.
Oh yeah.
Like every day
we
at
had
dusk.
Stories upon stories.
Every day at dusk, this like herd of or pack, whatever you call them, of skunks would come out to scavenge. And you're just sitting around eating your dinner, like, you know, around the campfire. You're just like, do not move. And these skunks, I mean, are at your feet, just like looking at you, like totally don't care. But
I totally forgot about that. That camping trip was wild.
I would
literally.
like much rather face a bear than a skunk in the wild.
That campground though had a splash pad and a pool.
That is true.
And that was a major plus that we spent a lot of time there.
Good transition into one of the tips is that if you're the adventurous, kind of like backcountry type camper, when you have kids, you start to get into the glamping scene. I will say we slowly turned because we used to backpack.
We backpacked a lot together.
We slowly turned into glamping type people.
In fact, people made fun of us for our tubs. So we have a tub system.
We have organization.
So we have a ton of camping gear and we keep it in these tubs that then when we pack up every year for camping, it's super easy because we just get the tubs out. We might, shovel some stuff around, get rid of some stuff, whatever, clean it out. But we throw the tubs in the car and we're ready to go.
Yeah.
We keep all of our stuff together and we were mercilessly made fun of about our tubs.
But just
how organized and like bougie. They were like, you're so bougie. You have like all this gear. And it's like, well, but it's worth it to have the gear. And
so back on the splash pad thing, like we would select campgrounds that had activities for kids if kids are getting bored or they just want to like a change, there's something to do, like different activities. And so you got to be a lot more selective, especially like at some of those younger age when, like I said earlier, they just don't get it. Like now our kids are like school age. Like we actually do a lot of like off grid camping and like we will just like sit in our lawn chairs and our kids will just have adventures in the woods like all day. And it's awesome. But at those younger age, like you kind of got to change it up. Except
for, do you remember we went off-grid camping at the start of COVID on our friend's property? Do you remember that?
Yes.
And so Josie would have been 1.5.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting, so that we did off-grid for that one.
Well, we've done it. Yeah. But I'm just saying that they're older age now that like kids can just be entertained by the woods a lot easier than some of those younger kids that like they'll be into it for an hour and then they're just like, okay, what else to do? So we would be selective on where we went. We were very selective on weather because we learned firsthand how miserable a wet camping trip would be and a super hot or super cold one would be. Even if you're at a campsite with electricity, which was really nice and recommend, even then, like if it's super cold, I mean, the only place you want to be in is in the tent, and that's no fun.
Yeah.
So like we would be pretty selective, and we'd plan ahead. And
The other thing
we would reserve some of these nice campgrounds with good experiences nearby way ahead, so that we made sure we just had like a more seamless experience with these littles.
Yeah. And then the other thing is Ben is really into shade. And so, but I feel like, you know, it's helpful. So he would hyper analyze. I mean, I'm talking like get Google Maps out, satellite view.
No, it's Google Maps and Google Earth.
And Google Earth and like analyze the shade amount at certain times in the day. I'm married to a monster. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, it actually was helpful. And so he would really look for, and a lot of the, at least the government recreation.gov sites, they will actually list, is it shady or is it not? It'll say, you know, full shade or part shade. But I do not recommend doing a camping spot without shade.
With
kids.
full sun.
Because that can get really exhausting. And the kids just they don't have as much fun. Also, then there's not trees and nature for them to play with, which I feel like is a big part of camping. You know, while we were cooking or setting up, they would go off into the woods and, you know, play even when they were little, you know, near us, but we would have, you know, trees and sticks and they would go collect pine cones or just whatever.
Yeah.
And that was really fun.
You know, because there's a lot of campgrounds you can find, especially around like Corps of Engineer land or like a lake that's just like wide open, because it's kind of more engineered to be like RV friendly. Because if you're an RV, you don't really care about necessarily all that shade. And so people will book up these sites and then you're just sitting in the sun and it's so hot. And the people with campers listening are probably just like, dude, yeah, it's so much easier just to have a camper. But if you don't want to have a camper, what we did one year was we just did the math. We're like, dude, we could buy a really nice air conditioner for our tent. It'd be way cheaper. It'd be like one camper payment and we could have an air conditioner. So we have an air conditioner and it's awesome. But one year when we used it, we were in the sun and it couldn't cut it. And it's a nice air conditioner that's big for that size of tent. But even with just like that direct sun in the summer, I mean, you just can't compete with it. And so weather's a big deal. But if you do go somewhere hot, get you an air conditioner.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And then you don't need a camper.
Yeah.
Definitely a heater. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah. Pack and plays are helpful. Now we have this awesome bunk bed cot situation, which is really fun. So the girls will take their sleeping bags and sleep on the bunk bed cot. And then Ben and I both have cots, and then one girl sleeps on the floor and they rotate who does that. But that's nice to have. But I mean, other than that, I think the last thing I'll say is I think another reason why we camped was because, as we've shared in the past, we did not have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of people think, oh, if I'm going to go camping, I need to get an RV or I need to do this or that. But tent camping, it's inexpensive and it can be really fun and really enjoyable. And I think for you and I, it was just, we didn't have a whole lot of options. Mm-hmm. I mean, camping was kind of our thing. It was like what we did for many years when we didn't have a lot of money. And it was just a way for us to be able to make memories with our kids and get out of the house and it be, I mean, really inexpensive.
Yeah. We still do not want a camper. We've gotten close to wanting it every once in a while. I think where a camper pays off is if you want to camp a lot in more extreme weather situations. Like that's when, and if you want to do that a lot, that's probably a good investment. But just know it's a lot of maintenance. Like growing up around campers, I mean, it's just constant maintenance. And that's just part of the trade-off. But you can make a comfortable experience with tents if you just slowly invest in better gear. That's going to just simple things like, you know, blackout tents, but also just level your expectations. You know, one thing we learned too, Jess, like we never did one night. We knew if we did one night, it would not be worth it. With littles, is we would plan at least 2 or 3 nights to then, because it takes us so long to kind of settle in and get comfortable. And then sometimes even if we planned for a few nights, we might come home early and we would just learn to be cool with that and not feel like we failed or something, because it is sacrifice camping with little kids, but I'm glad we did it though.
Yeah. Well, and now our girls, I mean, love camping.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to do that for their birthdays. They love the outdoors. They have no problem with getting dirty, running through the woods, just any of it. I mean, they're outdoors girls, all three of them, and they all are different, personalities and stuff. But so I think in that regard, it was worth it.
Yeah. And I think it's just good for kids to experience some discomfort sometimes, and like being outside and having to just have some grit and get your hands dirty. I think that's just really good for the development of kids too.
Well, I think that's all of our tips for today on camping. Hope you guys maybe are inspired this spring, summer, or even fall to camp with your littles. If you do, please share a picture with us or let us know.
And share your tips.
Yeah, and share. Oh, yeah. And if you have any tips, for sure, share those with us. And, we can try to post them on social media. I think that's about it.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening today. It would mean so much to us if you left a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you heard this.
And let us know your thoughts on today's episode by leaving a comment on Spotify or YouTube, where you can also watch these episodes.